All right. Good evening, Angels. Sorry we're a little bit late. We had some technical difficulties, but here we are with a bunch of fabulous winemakers for this Octaster event, which is a Red Masterclass. And I'm being joined tonight by Shelley from Naked Wines as well.
Hi.
And obviously a bunch of our wonderful winemakers. So I'll just quickly go around the room and let everyone introduce themselves. Actually, I think I will have to point in whoever is my corner up there. So it's Stewie Bourne first. So Stewie.
Hello, everyone out there. Thank you for joining us tonight with what promises to be a really lovely look at a whole bunch of reds. I've got them sitting in front of me and I can't wait for tonight. I've been naked for a fair while now and you guys have just been really great supporters of me. So thanks very much for being on board. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. And below you, I have Caroline Dunn.
Hi guys, how are you? It's great to be here tonight and thanks for joining us. Got a great lineup of wines, so looking forward to getting into it.
Cool. And next to Caroline is Sorby Adams, Simon Sorby Adams, I should say.
Evening, Angels. How are we? It's interesting that we started off with the three Barossa people. That's quite good. Get the runs on the board first, guys. Nice to be with you. We're going to have a fun night. Look forward to it.
Awesome. And I will go to Kobe Ladwig.
Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us. And as we say, we always say the best to last, so we're heading over to Western Australia, away from the Barossa.
Bring it on, Kobe.
Well, we do have another Western Australian next to Kobe, Stuart Pym.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be here. I suspect this is going to be fun. And I've put a special shirt on for you. And you have to remember it's only 5 o'clock over here, and I wouldn't normally be drinking my reds just yet.
Sure. Yeah. All right. And
champagne yet.
Absolutely. And next to Stuart Pym is Ralph Dunning.
Hello, Angels. Welcome. Thank you all for being here tonight. I normally represent the Barossa with one of our Scribe products, but tonight I'm with Team Western Australia, showing you a wine that we've got in the new Stop the Squeeze program. So I hope you're looking forward to it. We all are. And we have to do a battle of the East meets West, I reckon.
Bring it on.
I'm sure it'll happen. And, last but not least, Ben Riggs, representing McLaren Vale and South Australia, maybe in general.
Interestingly, the Barossa is there to be slow and steady at the beginning, but McLaren Vale finishes off with lots of sixes to finish the innings. So yeah, well put, Simon. Perfect. Set it up beautifully. I've under my own moniker, I've been naked for a couple of years now, but I've actually been making wines for various different naked people for quite a few years. So I have a bit of history of nakedness.
Awesome. All right, so I'm sure that everyone's sort of got stuck into the wines already, but I thought I'd just quickly go through the tasting order of these wines. So start with the lighter bodied, moving into a bit heavier in flavor. So traditional tasting order, we have Pinot Noir first. Going into a medium bodied Shiraz from Lover's Mark. Sorry, that was the Ben Riggs Pinot Noir we're starting with. Lover's Mark Shiraz second, followed by the Dolan and Dunn Shiraz Cabernet, followed by the Four Men and a Dog Cabernet Merlot, and the fifth wine is the Byron Harold Companions Great Southern Cabernet, which is this wine here, and finishing off with the beautiful Mud River Cabernet from Stuart Pym, Hearts and Bones and Jelly. So we got a few wines to get through. I should say that you didn't see Sorby Adams wine in there. Unfortunately, it had sold out already. So Simon Sorby's come up with a replacement here, which we will have in stock very soon. It's his reserve Cabernet. So we will give that a bit of an extra plug, but it's not part of the tasting pack. It will be available to pre-order as of tonight. But without further ado, I will hand over to Ben Riggs to talk about Pinot Noir.
Welcome, everybody. It's actually the first time I've released the Pinot Noir under my own label. I've made a few for a bunch of different people. It's from Woodside Vineyards in the Adelaide Hills from 2020, which is tough vintage, but one of the greatest vintages ever potentially. But in the Adelaide Hills, there were some fires that caused a bit of grief. We got away with this block without getting, there was some fire, but no smoke issues with this wine. The intention with the abundance label with all of the wines is to make these lovely, delicious, juicy, succulent, drinkable wines. It wants to be serious, but something you want to have another glass, have another sip, have another glass. I like my Pinot Noirs to be pretty and perfumed, and this one certainly, if you have a smell, fits that category. There's quite a percentage of whole bunch. All in oak, but very, very small amount of new oak. So to try and keep the fragrance and perfume and all the pretty things that happen with Pinot in good parts of the world. Yeah, it's about perfume, fragrance. For want of a better word, a feminine style of Pinot Noir. I like to show I'm in touch with my feminine side. At 120 something kilograms, it's very hard to do. Stop laughing, Caroline.
No.
She's scoffing at me. Can't believe it.
And a bit of whole bunch in there. Maybe be interesting to explore that a little bit for the Angels, since we're doing a Red Masterclass. A bit of winemaker jargon there. So what do you mean by whole bunch?
So we put about 10 or 15% of whole bunches in the bottom of the 5-ton open fermenter, and so you get a little bit of what's called carbonic maceration. So some of the berries go through a different fermentation where they're in a carbon dioxide rich atmosphere. They sort of do an internal breakdown of the cells, which releases different aromatics and color without necessarily quite so much tannin. The stalks have quite an impact on aromatics when you put some stalks in the ferment. Funny enough, the first time I ever played with whole bunches in a ferment was in the 90s when Kerry Thompson worked for me, and we used to trial some Grenache with whole bunches, and from there is when I really started to fall in love with it, and started then doing it with some Pinots as well, which was common, but I'd never really played with it before. You can do too much and it gets a bit of greenness and herbalness, but in balance, it makes lovely perfume and fragrance and spice in the wine. It's a pretty color. It's not particularly dark. Sorry, am I supposed to lift the... All right, something just got in the way there. Should I lift the bottle in the background? Is that this one? Someone just asked if I should lift the bottle up. That's the Pinot Noir there, and I've got the whole range in the background, the Abundance range, which is about to be launched in the next few weeks. Sorry, Johan, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. And please, throughout the night, feel free to weigh in. We got some very accomplished winemakers here, so I'm sure you don't want to hear from me when we got such a beautiful lineup in the room. So if anyone's got any comments on whole bunch in Pinot Noir or anything else that you think might apply, please feel free to jump in.
Ben, is it some of the new funky French clones of Pinot? What are you working with?
This one is entirely predominantly 777.
Okay.
There is on the block some 114, 115, and MV6, but in 2020, this was all pretty much 777.
Yeah.
So which I quite like. I love the perfume. Personally, I'm liking more bright, fresh perfume styles of Pinot, and so to me 777 gives a lot of that. We've actually just got coming on stream in 23 we'll have the first of the newest clones. Interestingly, a lot of the clones selected in places like Burgundy are selected because they're early ripening, and we then plant them in Australia. And there's now some of the later ripening clones come on stream. So it'll be interesting to see what they look like in comparison.
Okay, now we've done the whole bunch. So that is whole bunch is, you know, instead of crushing all the grapes and get the free run juice, you chuck in some bunches of whole grapes with the stems and all. But now we're getting into clones as well. I mean, that sounds a bit like Star Wars, I think.
Sure does.
Can someone elaborate and explain clones in Pinot Noir in a straightforward way?
Look, every variety began once upon a time with one single plant, I guess, and then people planted it, and there were, you know, genetic adjustments of that, and people took cuttings, and you know, when I first came to McLaren Vale, the predominant clone of Cabernet was ancient, and from that they had Raynell selections and Langhorne Creek selections, and then eventually clones. And the problem with the ancient stuff is it all varied a lot. So you'd have one vine with no grapes, one with big fat grapes, one with perfect Cabernet. And so by selecting those vines, you're getting the ones that yield better, that have better color or better tannin or whatever you're looking for. A lot of the clones, when old grade people like Simon and I started making wine, were selected in Davis, and they were often selected for their yields rather than their quality. But over the last, how many years is this now, Simon? 40?
I just did my 42nd vintage.
Over a very long period of time, we've actually started focusing on quality, and we look at things like aromatics and tannin levels, and so there's clonal selections are a lot better now. And it's not genetic engineering, or it's just really selecting the vines that have the bunches that produce the characters that we think is making the better quality wine, or the better style that we want. And with Pinot Noir, we started out really with things like MV6, which is a very dark color Pinot and very much more tannin. And then we had, I think it's D5 V12, which was considered a sparkling clone, which was basically a heavy cropping clone that was better for sparkling than table. And then slowly but surely, we've introduced these other clones like 777, 114, 115, and a few others, Mariafeld and others I can't remember their names. Too many to remember. And it's making better wine, you know, and this makes a really pretty style, and that's what I like about it. I like the freshness, the perfume, the fragrance. There's nice tannin and structure, but this is intended to be a lovely glass of wine that you want to go back and have another taste, another glass, another bottle.
And if you don't mind, Ben, we've got a couple of angel questions, and on that note of grabbing another bottle, are you doing another Abundance Pinot for V21?
Yes, definitely. And 21 is, we've been a bit spoilt in our part of the world. 2020 was pretty spectacular, apart from, say, the fires in the Adelaide Hills, and 21 is, in my time in this area, in Adelaide Hills, McLaren Vale, I mean, everywhere, it's probably one of the best 3 or 4 I've ever seen. So yeah, the 21's amazing.
Oh, well, I'm sure that's good news to the angels. I think I might pick another question before. I think we've got a lot of great wine to talk about. So I think another angel question we have here is, what would you say are the characteristics unique to the Adelaide Hills of Pinot?
Well, it's a big, broad region from north to south. Adelaide Hills covers a huge area with lots of, you know, if you get towards Kersbrook, much warmer, almost Barossa-like. Piccadilly, very, very cold. And there's an abundance of styles of Pinot Noir from the Adelaide Hills. But I think, to me, I think I'm enjoying the wines that are showing perfume and fragrance. And you know, I look at a place like Central Otago, and I really fell in love with the prettier wines, the perfume wines. You know, there's a lot of Pinots that are more structured and earthy and complex. But to me, personally, as I get old and grumpy, I prefer the fresher, more fragrant, you know, wines with lots of character and charm and complexity, but have perfume and fragrance. And I think that's something we're getting better and better at in the Adelaide Hills. Nice.
Thanks for that, Ben.
Fantastic. All right. Thanks so much, Ben. We might move on to wine number 2. So this wine opens itself up to a whole lot of debate about regionality. We got a beautiful fruit-driven Shiraz from WA, from Kobe Ladwig, Lover's Mark. And yeah, tell us a bit about the wine, Kobe.
Yeah, so this wine. So typically, I'm predominantly known for the Great Southern. That's where I live, and I decided to venture out a little bit further north into the Swan Valley. I think the Swan Valley makes fantastic wines. They make incredible fortifieds, and Chenin Blanc out of the Swan Valley is becoming quite well known. And the thing about the Shiraz is it looks fantastic in the Swan Valley, but you've got to be very careful, because if you leave it on the vine too long, it becomes a fortified very quickly. The Swan Valley is obviously, for anyone that doesn't know, it's pretty on the doorstep of Perth. And it does get quite warm during summer, so you've got to be pretty careful. So yeah, I just really like the fact that the Swan Valley Shiraz is this super juicy, juby, really nice, rich Shiraz, and seems to work really well. It's one of my go-tos for barbecue wines. So yeah, I really like it. I do like what the Swan Valley can do. It is every year it's getting hotter and hotter up there. So we certainly have to be a little bit careful with our viticulture and what we're doing.
So with your wines, you source quite broadly. It's quite a big region, geographically quite a big area, right?
Yeah. So especially the Great Southern Wine Region is the biggest wine region in Australia by kilometres, I suppose. We're about about 100 kilometres north south and 150 kilometres east west. So yeah, for the Great Southern Wine Region, it's amazing that you can grow all varieties exceptionally well, and they don't have to be just in your little backyard. You can really spread yourself out and pick the eyes out of the climate and the soil that works really well. And there's a big variation because we are maritime, we are on the coast, and then we move about 100 kilometres inland into the Franklin River region, and the soils are very much different in the climate and the topography. And yeah, it's pretty exciting being down this way as a winemaker, because you get to see all types, and you tend to, in bad years, you generally don't get bad years. Everything's the quality that seems to come out of the Great Southerns is quite consistent because it's such a big area.
I mean, we see an abundance, to use that word again, of different Shiraz in plugging you then, Ben. In Australia, and I find it fascinating because obviously such a large country and a really widely grown grape, and can make such different wines depending on where you grow it. And almost I would guess every wine growing region in Australia grows Shiraz, and just from the people around this room who make incredible Shiraz, they look very, very different. So yeah, without too much rivalry banter, but go ahead if you'd like. I'd like some of your takes on Shiraz and stylistically where we're going in Australia, and if we should go somewhere, or is that variety just fantastic, which I think it is.
Yeah. I think as Ben said, even within where he's based with Pinot Noir, there's such a variation within just your own little sort of region, and I think with Shiraz, it's massive. We've got, as I said, my lover's mark out of the Swan Valley is incredibly fruit driven and pretty big, but you only have to move south and not very far, and you start coming through Geograph back down into the Great Southern region across the Margaret River, and Shiraz becomes quite elegant. And then further south into Mount Barker, we tend to get a bit more spice rather than that real jammy character. So, and that's just in Western Australia. And obviously, a lot of people drink Barossa Shiraz, and there's a lot of difference through there. And it makes a big difference in what just purely two blocks next to each other. One's on a bit more sandy soil, the other one's on more clay soil. And the difference in fruit spectrum is quite big. Where do I think Shiraz is heading? I'm not sure. I think there's a home for all Shiraz. I think everyone loves it. I do think there's been a bit of a push to maybe back down the alcohols a little bit and become a little bit more elegant, but there's plenty of room for big Shiraz. I think they're fantastic. Throw a big steak on the barbecue and you're away. But there's also really nice to have some really elegant Shiraz examples around that really suit some lighter dishes and maybe not so filling.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important question, because I think there's been a bit of a period the last few years where some critics have push Shiraz towards what they think is a more modern style, at the detriment of traditional styles. And I think we've been making great Shiraz for a very long time, from all sorts of regions, from Eden Valley, from, you know, like Mount Langi-Garang, from Barossa, McLaren Vale, and I think, you know, every style is exciting and interesting, but we definitely shouldn't forget about traditional Australian styles, because, I mean, a lot of us here have spent a lot of our lives traveling, showing our wines, and people all over the world love those traditional styles. And, you know, we've had interesting debates in McLaren Vale for many years with, you know, judging of the wine show focused on cool climate styles rather than what we do really well in a place like McLaren Vale or Barossa. And I think it's important that we don't forget traditional styles, and we keep exploring the more modern and different styles as well.
I think that's really relevant, Ben, especially when, you know, you've got two established regions like McLaren Vale and Barossa that have so many old vineyards. You don't have to make the more modern styles from those old vineyards. You know, those old vineyards that have such low yields, they're going to make the more big, full-bodied traditional styles, and that should not ever be forgotten.
I think that's a thing.
I agree. I've got to say, I agree completely with Sorby on this. I mean, you know, we've, as Ben was saying, we've spent many, many years traveling the world, talking to people about Australian wine. And if there's one thing that they all unite behind, it's Shiraz. And it's basically the traditional old style of Shiraz that's come off, you know, older vineyards, 40 plus years, that are lower yielding and delivering quite traditional styles and quite reasonable weight in their offerings. They are loved. That's what actually drove the massive growth in the Australian wine exports markets for so many years. So, I mean, I think they most definitely still have a very credible place in the marketplace. But this move to something that's slightly backed off a bit in alcohol, a little bit more elegant, is just as effective in the marketplace, because it also can add nuance and add, you know, either, you know, a bit of pepperiness or savouriness or something like that with that elegant. So I think it just broadens the offering and makes Australian wine, certainly in the export market, a go-to. I mean, Shiraz is a go-to wine for Australia.
I don't know if you other winemakers remember. I mean, when I first started, it was a couple of years into winemaking. I mean, it was about 2003, maybe 2004, and Shiraz Viognier was just going berserk. You know, everyone was putting Viognier skins in with their Shiraz, and it was great. It was a lovely wine. They were looking fantastic, but you don't tend to see so many around anymore. They just sort of died away, and they never really took off. They was definitely around for probably 5 or 6 years. And whether people are still doing it, but they're just not putting it on their label anymore because of a marketing reason, I'm not sure.
I made quite a few of those, Toby, and over the years you find that 1% Viognier becomes the most dominant variety in the whole blend.
Yeah.
It became the gatekeepers that didn't want to put it on the label, but there's still a lot of Shiraz Viognier made and consumed and loved. It's just that you don't put the word on.
No one knows how to say it.
I think what you've done there, Sorb, was also you've touched on a point that I've always loved to explore as a winemaker, is that you're right, there are some vineyards where you don't determine the style of the wine. They actually set it for you. Yep. Where there's other vineyards you can walk through where you've probably got more of an artistic approach to it as to how you paint the brush strokes through that vineyard. But there are definitely some of these old vineyards from McLaren Vale, from Clare, from the Barossa, from a lot of parts of Australia, where if you're actually smart enough as a winemaker, the style is actually set in the vineyard for you, and you just got to interpret the vineyard rather than you try to interpret something else.
Yeah, and especially, I agree with you, especially in a year like we've just had, you know, it's one of the laziest vintages I think we've all enjoyed because they just made themselves.
Exactly.
Listen, sorry, I'm going to have to interject there. I would happily sit here and talk about Shiraz for 4 hours, and I know you all would as well. So
we would just absolutely. He got too excited. He's turned into a robot.
Oh, sorry. So did we have any questions from the angels?
Lots of comments about regionality, and like there was comments about a dog a little earlier. I think someone had a dog visiting.
Kobe, any aging recommendations for the Lover's Mark?
Yeah, look, I think this one's a nice one to if you can sit on it for 8 to 10 years. I think it'll just slowly develop, and a bit more of that fruit will sit in the background, a bit more oak will come through, and it'll balance out. But I tell you what, I mean, I personally make wines to be drunk now, and it's definitely drinking well now. So and that's the style that I like to make.
Fantastic. It's got a lot of very nice comments there. All right, we will move on to the third wine. Very quintessential Aussie blend, Shiraz Cabernet. And Caroline Dunn's got a lovely example from Langhorne Creek, I believe.
Yes, it is. It's Langhorne Creek. Hi, Angels. So this one is a wine. This is the I don't know how well you can see it with my background. The Longhorn Peak. Oops, just got this thing come up now. The Longhorn Peak Shiraz Cabernet from Langhorne Creek, and this is under the Dolan and Dunn label that I work on with my off-sider Nigel Dolan, who's not here tonight, unfortunately, but we both have a really long history with Langhorne Creek. We both live in the Barossa and we're based in the Barossa, but Langhorne Creek is sort of second to our hearts, I guess. And this particular vineyard, this is actually a single vineyard wine. All the fruit comes from the Matala vineyard, which is a very famous vineyard in Langhorne Creek. And our history, in fact, Nigel's history with this vineyard goes back a really long time. His father actually did his very first vintage experience work at Matala back when he was, straight out of university. So they've had a really long history in their family, and I've been working with the fruit from this vineyard for probably about 15 or so years. And so we're really excited to be able to take fruit from the vineyard. And I guess, Langhorne Creek is very different region from the Barossa, in the sense that the fruit is really lovely and approachable. It's really soft and fruity, and this wine is really unapologetically fruity. That's what we're really kind of going for with this wine. But you also see from Langhorne Creek some of those slightly eucalypty, minty characters that come through as well. So with this wine, we've blended Shiraz and Cabernet, and as Johan said, it's a really traditional Australian blend. And it's really not a blend that you see much around the world. It's very, very much an Australian blend. And to me, the concept of blending in the first place is all about you want to end up, well, it's the whole being greater than the sum of the parts. That's really what it's about. So you're not going to put two wines together unless you get a better result than what you had as two individual wines. So Shiraz and Cabernet have very different flavor profiles, and I look quite a lot at the sort of shapes of the wine on your palate, and Shiraz is a very round, mid-palate focused variety, whereas Cabernet is quite linear. It's a lot longer on your palate and a lot finer. And you put the two together and you get both. So you get the best of both worlds. So you're getting that lovely round mid-palate fruit, but then you're getting a lovely length of tannin and length of flavour from the Cabernet. So as Stewie was saying before, some vineyards and some varieties, really just want to stand alone, and they do what they do. But then there are others that you can work with that just put together give you a more complete wine. So that's what this wine's all about.
What a lovely description that was. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah, and if I can jump in with an Angel question. I think, Caroline, what we're looking to understand is, do you have any views on the unique characteristics of that region, so the Langhorne Creek region? We've got the Angels wanting to learn more.
Yeah, sure. I think there are a couple of, I've worked with Langhorne Creek for a long time. I used to work with Wolf Blass, so before I was naked. So Wolf Blass has a lot of wine from Langhorne Creek, and we had a couple of theories that we used to talk about as far as where the flavors come from Langhorne Creek fruit. And one of the unique things about Langhorne Creek is that it's flood irrigated. So there's a couple of rivers that run through there, the main one being the Bremer River. And that river, not in drought years, but in years where there's enough rain, it will actually, you can open up the floodgates, the vineyards can open up the floodgates, and that the water from the river will actually flood through the vineyards in winter. And that's quite unique in Australia. And there is a theory that as that water sort of flows right through down from the Adelaide Hills and goes, and as it travels down the river, it picks up a lot of sort of debris from all the eucalypt trees and things like that. And that all, when it's flooded, it then deposits all that in the soil, and the vines actually pick that up. So you get this really characteristic sort of eucalypty, slightly minty sort of flavors that come out of Langhorne Creek. And that character is reasonably commonly seen in Cabernet, but in Langhorne Creek, you actually see it in Shiraz as well. So it's quite an interesting character. And the other theory is that it's just because there's a whole heap of gum trees planted in Langhorne Creek around the vineyards. And so it's probably a combination of the two.
One of the other things about Langhorne Creek is it I was involved in vineyard for many years, and we had the weather station there, Adelaide Hills, McLaren Vale. The peak temperature in Langhorne Creek is often lower than the peak temperature in some of the Adelaide Hills. It just happens early in the morning, drops off in the afternoon, whereas Adelaide Hills peak will happen at 3:30, 4 o'clock and drop by 4:30, 5 o'clock. And so it's sort of mild. It's like a cool desert, very low rainfall, quite cool, and a very different temperature profile to say McLaren Vale and Adelaide Hills, and therefore Barossa and everywhere else. Sometimes the peaks in Langhorne Creek are higher than anywhere else in our regions, but generally it's a cool desert, really.
Yeah. And the other thing that's quite unique about Langhorne Creek wines is that they're very approachable wines when they're young, and so you get this lovely sort of softness and things. But those same wines have incredible staying power, and so they'll actually mature for a long time and hold up really well. So that's quite lovely, because you can take a Langhorne Creek wine that's 10, 15 years old and still be getting these beautiful, bright sort of mulberry fruit characters and things like that. And so, yeah, it's quite a unique region. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, it is really, really, underrated, not amongst you winemakers. And, like you said, Wolf Blass has known that for a long time, what Langhorne can produce. And it's just, that Barossa McLaren was so much more household names. But yeah, well worth a visit. It's not definitely for Angels. All right, thanks very much, Caroline. We will move on to Sorby Adams, who hasn't got a wine, but I'm sure that Sorby's got a few things to say.
He's always got a wine.
Now, I don't have a wine to taste tonight, but I'd like to spend a couple of minutes talking about a brand new product that I think you can see there. The Couch Shiraz has been with Naked for 3 vintages now, and we're just about to launch the one I showed you, which is the Couch Cabernet. So it's a brand new wine. It's predominantly from Eden Valley. It's 90% Cabernet, a little bit of Shiraz in it, and the thing that's a bit different about it is the oak strategy, where I love cooperages. I really get into cooperages and love the whole concept of aging oak before you make the barrels, and then whether you bend them using steam or whether you bend them using hot water, which is called immersion bending, and then also how old the oak is before you actually make the barrel. So this wine's got a lineage back to my Yalumba days, and Harold will love this story. He'll actually probably be able to tell it better than I can. So a wine that we created back in the late 80s at Yalumba was called Octavius. And it came about actually by a journey of discovery. So we shifted the cooperage in Yalumba in 1988 and found a pallet of American oak that we realized had been sitting there for 8 years and had never been worked with. And I said to the coopers at the time, okay, knock up some small barrels, and they were octaves, 80 litres, American oak. And when the coopers were firing the barrels, Andrew Broad, the head cooper, he rang me and he said, "Saul, this has got a weird smell. He said, I just don't understand it." And I went down to the cooperage and put my head in the barrel and I said, "That is so sexy. This is going to be sensational." So I was going to put fortified wine into the barrels, but instead we put our best red from the vintage into it. And the story was born. Octavius was born. So it's a wine back in those days that was mature in 8-year-old air-dried American oak then. Now, the style of Octavius has changed a little since then, but this whole theory of air drying oak for longer than is commercially normal is something that's always fascinated me. And in the couch, we're using 4-year-old air-dried barrels at the moment. And next year at our new winery here, we're actually going to be starting to mature oak here at the winery ourselves. So we will eventually be able to have 5-year air-dried oak transformed into barrels by a local cooper, Andy Stiller at Bethany, who's going to start making barrels here in the Barossa. So we'll have 5-year air-dried French oak, fine-grained French oak for our most premium reds. And that's something that's pretty unique, I think. So just to explain a bit more about the couch. Nice dog, Stewie. The couch is a reference to one of my ancestors on my father's side 6 generations ago, John Couch Adams, who sounds a bit like a lazy bloke, but he actually mathematically discovered Neptune. So he did that by finding irregularities in the orbital patterns of other planets. So he deduced that there was another planet out there. And then another astronomer from France, who was Vernier, he actually sighted the planet. So John Couch Adams and Vernier were co-credited with the discovery of Neptune. So this is just a bit of a fun label that we do exclusively for Naked, the Couch, and we have a Cabernet now joining the Shiraz.
I mean, you don't have a big head, but how the hell did you fit your head inside the Octavius barrel?
I'll just sit with a small head, Ben. Yeah, so 80-litre barrels. So you know, you got a huge surface area of oak for not many litres of wine, and yeah, they were big oaky wines. But as Caroline would know, back in the blast days, that was the way we made things back then. And, you know, Johnny Glatzer always used to say, "No wood, no good." So, you know, bring it on. And in the late 80s, early 90s, as Ralph would know, you know, Yalumba enjoyed incredible success with that range of wines. Now,
we used to have a lot of sales people.
But it goes back to the story that we were talking about before. Why would you want to lose that style of old vine Shiraz, whether it's McLaren Vale or Barossa, and a unique oak concept? Why would you want to lose that? There's room for other varieties to bring in other more elegant styles, but there's certainly a space for the big traditional full-bodied Aussie dry red.
Here, Simon. It's becoming so boring hearing people talk anti-oak, anti-flavour, anti-tradition, anti-character, and some of the people who you know criticise wine having oak would, if they had the chance of drinking a first growth Bordeaux that had 100% new French oak, and they'd go frothy at the mouth over, whereas and it's an important characteristic in wine. And interestingly, the survey before, I didn't see the percentage, but most people like their wines with oak character, and I think that is just, it's talked about far too much.
It's the woke left taking over.
Yeah,
I think you're preaching to the converted here a little bit, guys. I don't think there's any lack of love for big reds and plenty of oak in the angel base.
I think that there was a question on the. Sorry, Johan, to cut you off.
Yeah,
Get some questions in. Sorbs, have you tried whiskey barrels for aging wines?
No, I've not. I know that Orlando have done so with their double.
Not true, Simon. Not true. Back in the 80s, we all got sucked in with those bourbon barrels that they sandpapered and put nice hoops on and told us they were wine barrels, and they're all bloody cheap American bourbon barrels. You remember?
I've got to say, Ben, I've never been an American oak fan.
Oh, you're smarter than the rest of us because we all got conned. They brought out these barrels and they said, oh, they're amazing, properly aged. And they sanded them and put nice hoops on, and they're actually bourbon. And they tasted like bourbon. They were disgusting.
Fantastic.
So, it sounds like that dog's about to eat you.
Oh, I've got 3 dogs in here at the moment.
I think a lot of people must be loving this. I particularly am. I love wine and I love dogs. Like, this is a great time.
So I just want to loop back on that.
What's this here? Cat person? There's no cat people in this group, is there?
No.
Nice work, Cobe.
I'll skip the whiskey barrel debate. We can go to that another day, whether that's a marketing ploy or something that really would work with Shiraz or Cabernet, for example. But I will move on to Stewie Bourne, who's got a wonderful Cabernet Merlot to talk about. And it's not 4 Men in a Shed, it's 4 Men and a Dog that we're talking about here.
Yeah. Look, before we do that, a couple of quick things to start with. Firstly is, when you look at this range of wines here tonight, and we're at the 4th wine of the evening, let's go back one. First, you've got a Pinot from a guy who is literally Mr. McLaren Vale. Next one, you've got a Shiraz from a guy that loves playing down the bottom of WA, and now he's had to play up the north of WA. You've got one of the Barossa's greatest winemakers and probably the most awarded female winemaker in Australia, who's playing down at Langhorne Creek. And then you've got me from the Barossa, who's also having a crack down the creek. So now, if you want to look at some amazing variation and wines available to angels, so here you've literally got 4 winemakers who are probably more renowned for one thing, branching out and experimenting and playing with other things as well. So if that's not a pretty smart look at a group of wines tonight, nothing is. Second one,
gone mad.
Yeah, exactly. What, dogs and cats living together. Totally. The second one is Langhorne Creek. That Caroline talked before about her days at Blass, and I always remember being lucky enough to hang out with Johnny Glaitzer for a little while. And for those that know the Australian wine industry, Johnny Glaitzer is literally, he would have been one of the disciples when Jesus was working at Bethlehem Estate. And just an incredible bloke. And he always talked about Langhorne Creek being the engine room that would deliver more and would punch outside its class in a series of regions that were renowned throughout Australia. Langhorne Creek was that undiscovered absolute genius, the little quiet, unassuming, just it's going to deliver. So what we've did, 4 Men in a Shed was our Barossa. That's what we've always wanted to do. But 4 Men and the Dog came about from when, Johan, when you and the crew at Naked were looking at Stop the Squeeze. And obviously, we're not going to dwell on the fact that there's been changes to global wine markets for Australia, but we'd been mucking around in Langhorne Creek for a while, and wine that we had that was going to go to a particular export market, which was taken from us, suddenly becomes available. And with all of the angels' blessings, we've been able to bring Stop the Squeeze to you from a whole bunch of us. And literally, we can't say thank you enough to all you angels out there who've helped us along this way with this Stop the Squeeze program. And that's why me and the boys, we jumped in the ute a couple of times. We took the dog, went down to Langhorne Creek, met a few really lovely growers, started playing with Cabernet, Shiraz and Merlot. So the one you got at the moment is Cab Merlot. To Caroline's point before about that mintiness, that very distinctive eucalyptus character that you see down in the creek, where it comes from. There's all those theories that she talked about. I don't know what I believe in. All I know is that it's there. And I love that linear Cabernet with that little bit of mintiness. But by itself, look, you know, it's wonderful. But when you put a big splash of Merlot over the top of it and just soften it all out and give it some plummy texture, and you really make it, what was the thing you said, Caroline, about an approachability that Langhorne Creek's got? It, you know, right from the get-go as a young wine, these wines look beautiful. But you're right also, if you want to sit on them and age them, they continue to look beautiful. A bit like Sorby with his 42 vintages, you know, looked pretty good when he was a young bloke, still does. And I can't understand, he must have been making wine when he was 3. You know?
I was going to say he must have started when he's 30.
I'll deal with you later, Ralph.
Yeah. Yeah. Touche, Blackadder, touche. But all we wanted to do with this again is, you know, the Barossa is my home, but I really like being able to drive around, chuck the dog in the ute and go and find a couple of really interesting parts of South Australia. We are blessed in this state. And I think
the reason Langhorne Creek isn't a household name is there are no big companies and big brands that push the region. It's been a great factory to supply, you know, Wolf in the early days and Rosemount, and everybody. And there's been very few people who've been able to sort of create brands based around Langhorne Creek, therefore no one knows about it. But it is an incredibly important part of Australian winemaking, and the style, the consistency is just incredible. And unfortunately, it isn't as well known as it should be.
And I mean, one thing that fascinated me about the creek as well is some of the age of the vines is incredible. It's an old wine region in Australia. So anyone, you know, want to explore that a little bit more, but there's some seriously old wine material to be had, obviously.
Yeah, a small percentage of it. There's a lot of newer vineyard in Langhorne Creek nowadays, which I think is, you know, the traditional Langhorne Creek was the floodplain. The newer stuff is in some really beautiful soils, you know, sandy loam, irrigated, you know, great place to grow grapes. It's just, unfortunately, we need some brands and some more regionality for Langhorne Creek to achieve what it deserves.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people probably don't realise that the Wolf Blass Yellow Label range of wines, which is, you know, huge selling wines in Australia, predominantly come from Langhorne Creek, and that you don't know that because they're labelled as South Australia, but most of the fruit in them is from Langhorne Creek, and that's what makes that softness and approachability in those wines.
Well, weren't, Caroline, the original 3 Jimmy Watsons, they were mostly Langhorne Creek fruit? Yep,
they were. They not 100%, but they were. Yeah, significant amounts of Langhorne Creek, and obviously the grey label Cabernet Shiraz is the one that out of the Wolf Blass range that is labelled proudly as Langhorne Creek. Yeah. So and Black Label also usually has a Langhorne Creek component in it as well.
My vintage at Wolf Blass, I spent the entire vintage in the barrel hall filling all the new barrels. John would come and say, right, this wine we're going to do 0, 5, 10, 15, 20% pressings. You'd fill up a row, fill the rest with free run. And I would say of the stuff that went to fancy barrels, more than half would have come from Langhorne Creek. You know, there's some McLaren Vale batches, some Barossa batches, but maybe 70% were Langhorne Creek Shiraz and Cabernet. They're incredible. Yeah. And lots of, as we were saying before, Simon, a lot of very nice new oak.
Yeah, And John Glatzer is actually a legend of Langhorne Creek. He's officially been dubbed for that. So yeah, he's
a legend of everywhere.
Yep.
It used to amaze me watching him come to work in the morning. How the hell he? I've never met someone that could play quite so hard and still perform every day.
But what I loved, Ben, was the time that John hosted me out there a few times at the winery, where he'd stop outside and every truckie and every forklift driver and every cellar hand and every grower, everybody that came onto that site, John knew their first name. John knew their partner's name. He knew their kid's name. He knew their dog's name. He took so much pride in knowing everybody on the site and around, and that was probably what made him one of the greatest, or made him one of the greatest gentle persons, for want of a non-gender specific term, one of the great gentle persons of this industry.
He made a career out of people underestimating someone who was incredibly smart. And so similar thing happened when they did, I don't know, 25 or 30 or whatever years of Black Label. And I ran into him, I said, which was the best one? He said, the one that you did was probably one of the best. And he remembered the vintage that I was doing. Like, it was like 84. And how the hell would he remember that? You know, it's like, there's a whole lot more things to remember than that stuff, but he's pretty amazing. But, you know, he was a great champion of the area. And unfortunately, you know, we need to, I mean, I'm from McLaren Vale, but I make wine from a lot from Langhorne Creek and everywhere, but I love the region. I think it's really important.
Well, we've certainly given Langhorne Creek a bit of a plug tonight, that's for sure. So we had an interesting question. Listen, we're going to run over time. We're having a great chat. I hope no one minds that we just keep exploring, but we did have a really good question throughout, and that was about referring to vines as old. So there is an official classification of vine age, right? So does anyone want to just briefly touch on that? What is classified as an old vine and so on? I open the floor.
Well, the Barossa has a classification. Centenarian is obviously 100 years old. And I think, Stewie, correct me if I'm wrong, old is 70?
70, I reckon, is survivor, and old vine is at 35. And then I think there's the ancestral, which are the 125 pluses. Again, without the Barossa Old Vine Charter right in front of me at the moment, someone could Google it. Jump on, Google Barossa Old Vine Charter. It's all there on our regional website, and it takes you through the incredibly ancient scarce vineyards that have survived over 125 years, right back to you know, the more modern ones. But you know, old vines are a wonderful thing. But I think, you know, all of us on this panel would agree that we've all made really great wines from young vines, and we've probably had a couple of hit and misses from old vines, and vice versa. Age is one thing, but it's not the be all and end all about how to make great wine.
I think some of the first crops can be sensational. First crop of Riesling is amazing. It's hard to come back to that. And same as Pinot Noir. Sometimes the first crop off Pinot is amazing. So yeah, definitely young vines are can be amazing. Certainly as great.
There's no simple answer to any of this stuff. It just, the older they get, the, I mean, if they've survived 100, 125 years, it's usually because they're good. It's usually because they've worked, they're in the right spot. There's no, you can make bad wine out of old vines and you make great wine out of young vines, but generally the maturity helps even out the bumps.
Yeah, as you said, Ben, old vines are old for a very good reason, that they consistently make good wine every year.
Yeah, I mean, I think I always say that young vines are like young kids. They're energetic, but they don't tell very good stories. But the old vines are slow, but they tell great stories.
I think an interesting connection from Kobe's early talk about the Swan Valley is just acknowledging that there are some really old vines in the Swan Valley, 100-year-old plus in the Swan Valley, that does contribute to some lovely wines. And we need to remember that it's just broader than South Australia on these things.
Absolutely.
I agree.
somewhere else because they're shooting.
I think on that topic, we will stay with the unusual pairing of winemakers and regions, etc. And we'll take the Barossa boy over to Great Southern. So I will hand over to Ralph Dunning to talk about his Great Southern Cabernet.
I'm keen to see this, Ralph, because you've been Barossa forever.
Hello, Angels. Thank you very much. Yes, we've been naked for a long time with a product called Scribe out of the Barossa. And as Sorby will tell you, I spent 27 years at Yalumba. So most definitely my heart has a place in the Barossa. And I think I heard the other day somebody says, you know, everybody seems to live in Anguston. And one of you guys said, well, there's, you know, you either live in, there are two types of people in the Barossa. There's the people who live in Anguston and the people who want to live in Anguston, and they're absolutely right. That's exactly how it is. But I left Yalumba 11 years ago and started a business with my partner, Paul. And so therefore you've got Paul and Ralph there as winemakers. And we started in Great Southern. And everything that I've been listening to about Langhorne Creek, I can almost say is exactly what is about Great Southern. It's one of those absolutely fabulous regions that is little known, but the quality and the consistency of what it produces year in, year out is outstanding. And I know Kobe lives down there, and I know that he would back me up in saying it's probably one of the great unsung regions of Australia, which is why we started there. The wine that you're trying tonight is actually a blend from Great Southern and Margaret River. And it's one of the Stop the Squeeze wines, where Naked Again came to the rescue of a lot of us winemakers who were feeling a bit of a pinch from the loss of our China markets, and decided to help us out. And this is one of those wines. But everything, the one thing I guess about one of the things about this is being number 6 is undiscovered. Everyone talking about Langhorne Creek. Well, Great Southern, undiscovered. Some is better than the parts, Caroline. I absolutely agree. We've got a Cabernet here where we made a Cabernet in Great Southern and a Cabernet in Margaret River, put them both together, and we think we've made a complete wine. Oak is good, absolutely, Sorby. This is 100% of this has been in oak. Now, only 30% is new oak, but it's 100% oak matured. And new opportunity for us. This is what this wine is all about. It's a new opportunity. We spent our first 6 years in Great Southern. Then we took some vineyards where we leased them in Margaret River. So now we have the opportunity of using a label called Great Southern Margaret River and put them together. I don't know. I mean, please try the wine. I mean, on the nose, it's got everything that I think everyone's looking for in a straight Cabernet. You know, forest fruits, plums. You know, touch of mint, a bit of sage leaf, all the things that are classic Cabernet. But the palate, it's a medium-bodied wine. This could have been a really big wine if it had been 100% Great Southern. But it's not 100% Great Southern. We actually blended the Margaret River wine into it so that it became a medium-bodied wine, but we felt that that added a lot of elegance to it and silkiness to it as a style of wine. We think it's got a lovely balance and really good length to it. But I think the real story is about, again, it's stepping outside of our comfort zone and putting two regions together, and hopefully we've delivered to you a wine that we feel is a better wine together than they were independently. And that's what we think we've got. Another thing for the Angels, please, this is a vegan, vegetarian friendly wine. Why? Because we did not fine it. Why? It did not need it. If you put it in your mouth, mouthfeel is lovely. It's long, it's silky, it's soft. It didn't need fining, so we didn't fine it. So it's a vegan-friendly wine for you guys as well. What else can I tell you,
Well,
Johan?
Well, I think, Ralph, we've got a couple of questions from the angels here. One of our angels, let me scroll. There's a lot of good chat and excitement in the chat. Rob has asked, what type of oak? Is he
French oak. I'm
French.
with Sorby. Absolutely with Sorby. I remember Octavius, when we first launched it, everyone used to call it Oaktavius because, you know, octaves, and you put a wine in there and it was so powerful, so big. I mean, it was the right decision to do it with that wine. And Sorby will tell you the reason that he did it with that wine is because it was such a monster of a wine that we felt it could take that sort of oak treatment first up. And it was a time of oak. So, but I mean, that's been very much my only exposure to American oak. I believe in French oak. I think that lovely vanilla character, that, I mean, it's elegant, it's sexy, it's everything you said, Sorby, and I agree completely. So 100% into oak, 30% into new oak, the balance into 1 and 2 year old oak.
Excellent. Ralph, you did confuse a few people on the call there in terms of. Oh, sorry, I'm freezing again, aren't I?
No, you're all good.
Yeah, I'm all good. Yeah. In terms of fining and the wine being vegan, so what have those two got to do with each other?
Well, normally wines are considered to be not vegan friendly because when you fine them, which is basically trying to take some of the solids out, brighten it up, make it look things, you use either, you know, what they call a fish oil or eggs, whites, say egg whites to fine. Now, if you're using either of those, vegans and purists would turn around and say that's not a vegan friendly wine because you've actually used a protein, an animal protein, to fine the wine. All right, but if you don't fine the wine, there's no animal proteins in there, so therefore it's vegan friendly. So anyone who's vegetarian or vegan friendly and they want a wine that is like that, this is a wine that can appeal to them.
Okay, lovely. But obviously these days a lot of wines are, or more and more wines are becoming vegan friendly, even if they have been fined. So there are some good substitutes these days, I assume.
Yes. There are other substitutes that you can use that are not the proteins. But again, we're talking about traditional winemaking. In traditional winemaking, I mean, quite honestly, you know, egg whites was really quite traditional. That was how everybody brightened everything up. And, you know, the funny part about it is that when you fine even with egg whites, you can do any analysis you like in the afterwards to try and find any evidence of it, and it's almost non-existent. I mean, you cannot, it's almost undetectable.
It is undetectable. It's a physical screen. It's not a, it doesn't dissolve in the wine at all.
No.
But we haven't, normally people used egg for a long time because you have to put it on the label, even if it wasn't vegan, you have to say may contain traces of egg, and that became a real problem for people. Which is a pity because it's a wonderful fining agent. It does amazing things for softening and taking the edge off of wines, but it's all but disappeared from our winery.
But isn't it funny that you have to declare something that's not in there?
Mm.
Well, it is. I mean, I'm doing it verbally, but we don't do it on the label. You know, I mean, maybe we should. Maybe we're missing a trick there. I'm not sure, but. You know, I'm hoping that the Angels are finding this wine really easy drinking. It's got good length. It's got lovely silkiness, a really good balance, I think, between fruit, oak, and tannin. That's really actually in balance, and therefore, when you have a wine like that, why fine it? There's no need. I don't think there's any need.
I think we're finding we used to use a lot of egg. I remember when I first started winemaking, a lot of egg was just a standard thing, you know, 1 egg per barrel kind of was this thought. And over the years, you start, you know, people became more and more aware of other products, and we started using other products, and all of a sudden you work out that oxygen can do the same thing if used in the right way. And I think over time you build up other I suppose tools in the toolkit to make great wines without the use of certain products. And there's definitely, as Johan asked about, there's pea protein out there now that replaces.
Maybe take it back a step even further. So why are we finding the wines in the first place, or some wines? Ralph obviously saying he hasn't found the Companion's Cabernet, but why would you find wine just in general?
A lot of it comes back to filtration technology as well. Egg used to be a wonderful way of clarifying the wine, and then we used to use a lot of earth filtering, pad filters, etc. Now with some of the modern technology like crossflow, it's not as relevant because you can take a really solid, dirty wine and polish it up really easily with a crossflow filter. Whereas when you're using earth and pad, something like egg would actually take a lot of the solids, so it would really be easy to filter afterwards. It wasn't just a tannin finding, it was a physical screen. It's all a bit silly. There are some agents that you're allowed to use that you don't have to declare, and some you do. And I'm not sure what, I think there's a bit more rational thinking needs to come into it. There's some finding agents using white wine that don't take much out other than, like if you want to do an unfiltered white wine, there's a thing called isinglass, which clarifies it amazingly.
Right.
And, so there's, I think as much as anything, it was a physical screening. I used to make quite a big volume of church block when I was working at Wirrawurra, and we used to egg fine every litre of it. And we used to buy it in 10 litre bag and box of fresh egg white to fine church block. And that was as much about helping us filter as it was about taking tannin off the wine.
I think it's worthwhile just clarifying, and
actually,
Angels, that it's egg white, not eggs as well.
Oh yes, it's only the egg white.
Yolk's a different story.
Yeah. Okay. But the actual...
Johan, one of the things I've got to say that one of the other things is that we just had an absolute downpour here, because one of the things that we do is that we breed cattle up here as well, and I've actually found that the best fining for red wine is actually a thumping great big steak. It's fantastic. You've no idea how it softens it out.
Well, there you go. So the actual, but we still haven't properly answered a couple of questions here, I think, from the end. So the actual purpose of fining is to remove cloudiness from the wine, or why would you fine it?
And phenolics, that it can soften the tannins and take out phenolics, soften the bitterness in wine. So it's pretty important. But as I said, there's plenty of ways to soften a wine without having to use any fining agents at all.
Excellent. All right, cool. I think we have answered that question extensively. I think it's lovely how the conversation just goes, though. So fantastic conversation. Shelley, was there any other questions there?
I do think we did miss a more general question. And if I try and I'm not even going to try and scroll, there's so much good chat going on in the chat section. More about climate change. So what do we think that the climate change or the impacts might be on not just your regions, but generally for, I guess, producing the wines or the grapes for the wines that you make? Do you anticipate that it's going to, I guess, alter things quite greatly within perhaps the next 10 years?
I think pretty much, if you look, okay, if you honestly believe that the climate of the world is not changing, that's a different kettle of fish. I'd question you on that. Okay, the world is changing. But if you look at regions like the bottom part of Western Australia, across South Australia, through other parts of Victoria, the Australian wine industry, literally, you could almost say, was built on drought. So if the world is going to get a little bit warmer and a little bit drier, we probably already started historically from a warm and dry base, and we grow varieties that are incredibly tolerant to being in a dry, hot land. So I don't think we have to dramatically change course of what we've done as an industry historically, because pretty much, come to South Australia, it's the driest state on the driest continent on the face of the earth, where water is the most precious commodity we've got. If it's going to get warmer and drier, we're probably already mostly there anyway.
We're pretty drought proofing. Like McLaren Vale is nearly 80% recycled water. I know the Barossa's got more recycled water. That's water that was just pumped into the Gulf, and now we're using it for for viticulture and for growing food, which makes a lot of sense. And I'm certainly not a skeptic by any stretch of the imagination. It's a real thing. But strangely, we've had some of the latest, coldest vintages in my
Yeah, I
1988, and 17, 20, 21 have been some of the coldest, latest vintages that we've had in my career. Picking grapes in May is pretty unusual. So it's just something. It's so hard to put your finger on it yet, what it means. But having the sustainability of recycled water with some backup of bore, I think we're probably in a pretty good spot. And I think the Barossa is getting a better spot with more of the recycled water being plumbed up there.
I think, Shelley, to be honest, across Australia, I think there's general acknowledgement that it's a thing, that's a real thing, that it's here and that needs to be dealt with. But and that it is making viticulture more challenging in your actual in-vineyard practices. But I agree completely. I mean, everyone's going through lots of processes at the moment to make themselves more efficient and more effective with using less. So whether it's solar panels on warehouses and wineries, or if it's recycled water for flushing lines and things like that. I mean, we are making those changes. It is real. We have to work with it, and I believe that the industry, as an agricultural industry, is actually answering those challenges and making it work.
And Australia is also using now the best sustainable wine farming program in the world, really driven heavily by one of the angels, Jock Harvey, who we sort of took all the best sustainable models that we could find and created a model for McLaren Vale that's now a national model. There is nothing like it in the world, and I think you'll find the next couple of years you'll see more and more everybody getting on board, and it's a significant document, and it's something that is really quite amazing. That it's something I'm very proud of, being involved in McLaren Vale, that we took a year to make it happen here. Took a little while to convince some other parts of the industry in Australia, but once we did, it's an incredibly good model that is not just about being organic or biodynamic, or it's about actually leaving the land in a better place than you started working on it. And I think you'll see more and more of the wines through Naked and other channels that are putting the sustainable farming moniker on and really focused on creating something for the future.
Yeah, I agree. Everyone in the Australian wine industry should attempt to sign up to that program.
Yep.
So that's the Sustainable Wine Australia.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
WA, yep.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt something that the Angels will hear a bit about in the years to come.
You'll see a few wines from 2021. You'll see more in 22, but I think 23 will be when it'll start to really be quite a significant mark on labels in Australia. And the more of you guys out there that ask for it, the more that it'll happen. I think it's a really important document and really important model that we need to work on.
Yeah, we'll be fully on board by 22.
Excellent. And I guess sustainability is something, like I said, that Naked Wine will talk quite a lot about, but it's not only of course, the important environmental factors, but we're talking about social and economic sustainability here as well. So that, I think, Ben, it encompasses those aspects as well. But I think we have spent a lot of time in South Australia, so we will jet over to Margaret River to taste Stuart Pym's wonderful Cabernet.
Let the best will last, Stewie.
Is it morning there yet, Stuart?
Sorry?
Is it morning there yet?
No, it's not quite red wine time.
Oh, the sun's
yet,
still shining, Kobe. What the hell's out the back behind you?
Yeah, I know. It's amazing, isn't it?
How about try daylight saving, for God's sake?
It'll focus.
It's like messing with nature. And we don't need daylight saving. We have enough. We've got heaps of daylight. Not so much we can ripen the grapes easily, which of course is exactly what we can do in Margaret River. Anyway, what we have here 100% Cabernet Sauvignon from Margaret River, 2017. And Hearts and Bones and Jelly, which is my top wine. It's been really interesting following the discussion today, and I guess philosophically with what this wine is doing is it's not representing a single vineyard in Margaret River, but sort of a bit of diversity across the Margaret River region. But most of the grapes come from the central area, which is sort of known as Willie Abrupt. But it's probably from about 4 or 5 vineyards all up. But yeah, to really highlight just what Margaret River can do, but without being parochial about certain parts of it. But it is still all Margaret River. And we talked about the size of Langhorne Creek. Margaret River is about 130 kilometres north to south and about 30 kilometres east to west. So it's long and skinny. And where it is in Australia, if you think about that bottom little left-hand corner, it sticks out into the ocean and has several capes. So it's extraordinarily maritime. So it never gets really hot, but then it never gets really cold. We hardly ever get frosts, except for 2 years ago in my vineyard. It's a really lovely grape growing area where we can comfortably ripen varieties, but we tend not to get them really overripe or cooked. It's probably a little too warm for the more delicate varieties like Pinot Noir and Riesling. They seem to work a little better where it's a bit cooler, but Cabernet just seems to be its home. And I know there'll be people that disagree with me with this, but I think everyone in Margaret River would say that Margaret River is the Australian home for Cabernet Sauvignon. I saw a smile on Kobe's face then. I guess the other thing with Margaret River in the context of the whole of the Australian wine industry, it's a very young area too. So we are still finding our way through it. And I guess the oldest vines are just over 50 years old of the commercial plantings. So yeah, in the whole scheme of things, in the Australian context, it's a very young area, and it's also very varied. The soil varies an awful lot. It's very undulating. So you can get some really lovely vineyard sites, and within 500 meters, a fairly ordinary vineyard site. And I guess with me, I mean, I've been with Naked Wine since 2014, and making wine in the region consistently since 1991. So I guess I was lucky in that I actually knew what I considered lots of the good vineyards were, but I also had an ongoing working relationship with lots of the vineyard managers. So when I was in the situation where I wanted to really make a high-end, lovely Margaret River Cabernet Sauvignon, I could go to these vineyard people and do some deals and arrange to buy some grapes from them. And I have to say, something that the Naked Wines do really helped out here. Naked Wines pay promptly, and that's not something that is standard within the industry. So when I buy the grapes, I can pay the grape growers promptly, and they love it. So they're very happy to have me coming back. And that's a really fantastic part of it. Making the wines, as I said, 4 or 5 different vineyards. They're all picked separately, obviously, and fermented separately. There's a variety of time kept on the skins after fermentation. From some batches get pressed early, one batch pressed early, and then goes to barrel and finishes the fermentation in barrel, and the rest stay on skins for about 2 to 3 weeks to soften those firm Margaret River Cabernet Sauvignon tannins. They then stay in their separate batches and go into barrels, all French oak, as we've discussed. 30% new and stays in barrel for 2 years. The wine then gets bottled and then stays in bottle for at least 2 years. And as we mentioned, this is a 2017. So it's had some time in bottles to sit down and relax and let everything come together and really show what the wine's about. And I guess one of the signatures of Margaret River Cabernet is its tannic structure. It does have that classic longitudinal feel of Cabernet, and that Carolyn was talking about, with firm tannins on the finish, but certainly, and there was a lot of discussion about managing tannins and fining and stuff. For me, a lot of that way of getting refined, softer tannins starts in the vineyard and getting the vines in good condition when they're being picked, so the tannins are ripening with the flavours and the grapes and everything. And you do tend to get more refined, softer tannins that way. So the management of the tannins is starting in the vineyard, progressing through the winemaking process, and then at the end of the winemaking process, when you're looking to soften it a little further, if necessary, you can look at fining agents. And there is a good range of finding agents out there, from the very traditional to the more modern ones, as has been really well discussed. I haven't even tried it yet, so I better do that.
Beautiful wine, Stuart.
Yeah, great wine, Stewie. I've been having a little party here on my own, and I love it. It's a great wine. Well done.
We're always
Thank
having
you.
a party.
Stuart, the vines you're saying in Margaret River share something with Ralph and Simon and I. They're around 50 years of age.
That's only the oldest vines.
That's very flattering, Ben. I'm nearly ancestral.
And you know, sorry to interrupt, but I just had a flashback, Simon. The first time I met you was actually in Burgundy. We were looking at Pinot Noir at Faverly in 1986 in Nuit Saint-Georges.
I do remember that, and isn't it quite strange that we both have now, through Naked Wines, a Pinot Noir?
So we've been researching for a long time.
We have.
Obviously.
We've been through the bold dry red stage, and now we've turned to the woke left.
So hands up, everybody who's been to the Faverly Vineyard.
I can add a bit to my story. I parked in the town square with my hire car, and I think I had 12 parking fines. Everyone was every hour they doubled it. We were out to lunch afterwards, and it took a bit long to get back to the car. I didn't ever pay them, but my God, the parking fines were massive.
Hey, Stuart, we have an angel question here.
I forgot about wine. I was just
Well, the angels haven't forgotten. So could you please, or I mean, anyone, but I guess Stuart in this particular instance, could you perhaps explain the main differences between the Margaret River versus Coonawarra Cab Sav for us?
Okay. I guess I'm going to get into some personal views here, which is entertaining.
Safe space.
Certainly, I think, yeah, as I sort of mentioned earlier, for me, it starts at the vineyard level and at the soil level. And if we look at Coonawarra, it's very uniform in its soil with what they call the terra rossa, or the red dirt, and it's fairly flat and very consistent across there. Now, it does vary a little bit, but I often joke and I say the highest point in Coonawarra is the Canberra in the road. But it is a very consistent area with, and I think from my understanding, it has moderate water supplies in the limestone underneath the terra rossa. Now, Margaret River, by contrast, and they're not that dissimilar latitude, so they're not, just a latitude sense, not that dissimilar, but Margaret River is very undulating. It's very old soils, and with, you know, valleys and tops of hills, and all the hardest dirt is still on the top of the hill, because over the eons, all the softer sands have washed down to the valley. So the more fertile parts are in the valley, and the leaner, harder parts are on the top. And obviously, you can select aspects of whether you want the vineyard to face north, which is warmer because more sun on that side, or south, or if you want to get the morning sun east. So there's lots of variability that way. And I've often said to people, if you have a 10-acre vineyard, you've got 3 different soil types on it. So it is very varied, which then makes the vineyard management task a lot more complicated, because you can't just apply a single sort of recipe across all of it. You have to go and, if you're being really high end, you have to really go and monitor the different parts of the vineyard and react and behave differently as well, because you do get lots of variability in vine growth if it's on a leaner part of soil compared to a more vigorous one. So for me, I think Coonawarra gives a more consistent expression of Cabernet, and it has lovely blackcurrant fruits and is quite refined. Margaret River gives a bit more diversity in its flavours, from some blackcurrant to some red fruit. There are some sort of herby notes, and we get a little bit of the eucalypt. And for me, it's no doubt due to all the eucalypts in the area. It's funny, when I taste a Margaret River wine in Margaret River, I never notice eucalypt character, but if I happen to be doing a trade tasting in the city somewhere else, I certainly notice it. So it's just good. I think we're surrounded by it all the time. But Margaret River Cabernet for me gets a little more diversity in flavours, and it does have a stronger tannin profile.
I think that's the thing, Stuart, for me, the tannin structure of Margaret River is so profound.
Yep.
And for me, that, without denigrating Coonawarra, for me, that makes a more complete style.
Right, it's interesting, when I was studying what used to be called Riverina Murray Institute of Higher Education, it's now Charles Sturt Uni. That's just my age. I remember being in one of the classes there, and someone was telling me, you know, they did a measurement of tannins across Cabernet parts of in Bordeaux and around Australia. And Margaret River Cabernets had the highest level of tannins of any other region in Australia, but still less than that of Bordeaux. So we were sort of the most Bordelais sort of area. And I actually think the wines still represent that a bit as well, particularly depending on how you make them as well with your oak maturation and stuff. And I guess blending, but this is 100% Cabernet, so it's just really championing exactly what the region can do with Cabernet.
Lovely. I mean, it's a lovely wine, and you have to remember, Angels, as well, even though this is sort of on the more premium side of the naked wines price spectrum, you know, make no mistake that this is a top end Cabernet that you can, you know, sell it for quite a few years as well, Stuart, I would have thought.
Absolutely. Yep. Comfortably. People ask me how long you can sell the wines for, and I sort of says, well, it comes down to how many you bought and how organised your cellar is. If your cellar's like mine, you can age wines for ages because you forget they're there and you discover them much later on.
Don't you have about 2,000 wines in your cellar?
I don't have them catalogued. I think there's actually slightly more. It might be 2.5.
Oh.
But I haven't been counted yet. And I've got to change the balance now. I'm getting to that stage where I think I've got to, instead of increasing the number, I've got to buy less and drink more.
And the sad thing is, Stuart, I'm sure you've done what I've done and stuff you forget about. By the time you remember it, you've got a little old and tired now sometimes.
Particularly with white Burgundy.
Listen, it's been a lovely night. It's now 9:34. I think we're quite optimistic, thinking that these sessions will go for an hour. But it was a great conversation. It's taken a lot of different turns, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great night. So, Shelley, we've got a couple of other Octaster events coming up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So over the next couple of weeks, we've got, I think it might be one of my favorites as well. We've got Women in Wine, which is going to be really good. And also we've got Off the Beaten Track. So I'll drop the link in the chat, but also you can head to the Naked Wines website to check out those and grab a pack of wines to sip along. And yeah, we'll see you there, hopefully.
Anyway, if they're anywhere near as good as tonight was, they will be great events. So thank you very, very much, winemakers. Thank you, Angels, for staying with us and all the wonderful commentary. Thank you, Shelley, for co-hosting.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Thanks, Shelley. Thanks a lot, Shelley.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thank you. Happy birthday, Fred.
Thanks, guys.
Happy birthday.